You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama's syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. Man, we got the local, the state, the national, covering down on all the issues. And like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to Friday. Woo! You have made it. You made it through another week. You're heading to the weekend. So bless the Lord and pass the potato chips. Here we go. I'm not sure where that came from. I've never said that before in my life.
Pass the potato chips.
I don't know why.
Go on, bring them over here. I'll start chumping them.
I just pictured a weekend barbecue. I don't know. But anyway, Boomer's on the board.
I'm right here.
There you are.
Woo! Friday. Ready for Friday.
Good stuff. You got a weekend planned?
I don't know. You know, it's just all kid stuff, so which is a great weekend.
Okay. Well, I was going to say the unplanned weekend is sometimes the best one.
Stuff's going to happen.
Last weekend, my weekend, and it was all a blessing, but at the same time, my weekend was consumed with, family weddings and all kinds of stuff like that. And like, oh, I don't think there's anything planned this weekend. Although it is Mother's Day.
It is Mother's Day.
It is indeed.
Don't forget.
Yes, you and I both have mothers and wives.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
All right.
Blessings upon all y'all out there as Mother's Day weekend is upon you. So, hey, listen, we got a great show laid on for you at 2:30. I mean, coming up here just in 20 minutes or so. Justin Bogey from the Alabama Policy Institute is going to be here. Stephanie is away at the moment. I think her daughter's graduating, actually. One of her daughters. She has like 37 kids, something like that. But
There's
anyway,
a lot.
There's a lot. But anyway, no, Stephanie Smith from the Alabama Policy Institute could not be here today, but Justin Bogey will. And we're going to talk about, he went ahead and did the sort of the refreshing research. Not that the research was refreshing, but he refreshed his research on where we stand in terms of Alabama's immigration laws. And that's an important piece in today's climate. So we'll talk to Justin Bogey at 2:30. And then there's that triple dipper thing. So hit it, man.
The Triple Dipper. 3 stories you've got to know.
That's right, the Triple Dipper, 3 stories, 3 themes, if you will, that you have got to know. So the southern border is all the rage, right? I mean, it's all the thing. I mean, it's and it should be. I'm not downplaying it. It should be the biggest news story of the day right now. And what you might want to know is, how are we interacting with that? So number 1 of the Triple Dipper is called Bama on the Border. So yeah, we do have a role. Yes, we have some things that we're doing that we need to do. And I'm going to tell you too, in a minute, you're going to hear what we've done in the past, because Bama has been on the border more than once and quite heavily. So yeah, that's coming up. Number 1, Triple Dipper, Bama on the border. Number 2, I'm calling it military minded. I mean, there's a bunch of y'all out there, green suiters up here at Redstone, out at Anniston Army Depot, down yonder at Maxwell Air Force Base, and others who listen in other places. And then many of you who are actual veterans, retired from service, but you still get it. And then I got a bunch of patriots. I just know that to be a fact. So number 2 of the Triple Dipper is updates on issues related to the military. Military minded is what I'm calling it. And then number 3, ever so often, when I'm going through it, I find a strange thing being done by someone in an elected position or a bureaucrat, and you look at it and go, you can't make this stuff up. Like, really? That's what our tax dollars are going towards? That's where you're spending your time? That's what you're going to do to us next? So yeah, number 3 on the Triple Dipper, you can't make this stuff up is what I'm calling it. All right, let me jump on over there to my comments. And I mentioned a moment ago, there's been a lot of talk about the southern border. It's all in the news, and it should be, because Title 42 lifted yesterday. And the scenes we're seeing right now from the southern border are pretty epic. I mean, it's hard to imagine something outside of a war zone seeing this many people just displaced. And I will tell you, too, that in the military, a part of my training was to deal with displaced civilians, is what we call them. That's basically a refugee. And it's an amazing thing to watch the level of mass migration movement that we're seeing right there. It is an epic level of displaced civilians. But yeah, the border, the U.S. southern border, all the talk, but rightfully so. Like I said, the border crisis, and it truly is a border crisis, is having a devastating effect on the economies of communities all over the U.S., but especially on those that bear the brunt of the human tidal wave in the border regions of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California. Those border ranches and the cities and towns of all sizes, they are truly on the front lines of a situation that was absolutely avoidable, or at the very least could have been mitigated down to a manageable level. I mean, all my life I've heard of people coming across the Rio Grande, right? Nothing like what we're seeing in the history of the United States. It's amazing. It is said that right now every state is a border state, and that's true. I have no real sympathy for folks like New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who declared his own city on the far side of the nation to be a sanctuary city. He was just virtue signaling. He didn't think it would really come down to it. Well, it has. But what that does is it plays into the narrative that truly every state is a border state. But perhaps his buyer's remorse on those words will be a wake-up call to liberals everywhere. But nonetheless, I will readily acknowledge that there is pain being experienced by New York City right now. It is real. Reports just this morning are that they have no shelter space left in New York City. They're putting illegals into hotels, and they're considering setting up tents in Central Park, all while still being a half a nation away from the southern border. I mean, Alabama's not immune as well. The illegal population is already showing up here. I-20 is known as the human trafficking corridor. Fentanyl overdoses are happening in our communities. And the Alabama National Guard has been to the southern border more than once in the last few years. Every state is a border state right now. Every state is in the process of having to help fix, help feed, help defend, help process, help arrest, help shelter, help pay for. And there was a time, though, when it was not that way. There was a time just over 100 years ago when an entirely different approach was given to dealing with incursions at our southern border, and Alabama was right smack in the thick of it. So here's the historical narrative for you. It was the month of May in the year of 1916, exactly 107 years ago this week, when the order came from the War Department to surge troops to our U.S. southern border at what was referred to as maximum strength. The men of Alabama's 1st, 2nd, and 4th Alabama Infantry Battalions and the 1st Alabama Cavalry Regiment, all of the Alabama National Guard, mobilized and departed for the southern border. You see, a civil war had been raging in Mexico for the 6 years prior to that, and the U.S. had kept its distance, believing that it was a purely Mexican affair. But then Mexican guerrilla Pancho Villa and his troops, they crossed over into Columbus, New Mexico. They raided the garrison there, killing 18 U.S. citizens and laying claims to U.S. lands. Other raids followed in Texas towns of Glen Springs and Boquillas. President Wilson was having none of it, so he appointed General John Pershing to lead what was called the American Punitive Expedition. Punitive, meaning that it was payback time, and the U.S. border would be protected. The Alabamians were mobilized as part of a force of over 100,000 troops. And I'll be honest with you, many of those men, they had no great education. They were often poor. They came from Alabama's farms and small towns. Many of them had never even been outside the county they lived in, and they were rowdy, and they were tough, and they had to learn discipline and be drilled on the skills of being a soldier. Some of them came from families of means, but many of them received their first ever paycheck as uniformed soldiers defending our southern border. But they did it, and they acquitted themselves well despite the slow efforts of the federal government getting supplies and arms to each of the units from the various states. The Alabamians guarded the border. Pancho Villa was turned back. The Second War with Mexico never actually kicked off as some had feared it would. Instead of having to fight their way down to Mexico City, the records of that time indicate they settled into a rigorous training regimen in the Western heat. They spent time patrolling the border on guard duty. They truly, though, became a spirited fighting force. And it's a good thing they did, because the men of the Alabama regiments and the other state National Guards that were there, they were formed into the 42nd Division, which became known as the Rainbow Division, and acquitted themselves well on the battlefields of France in World War I. They went straight from the southern border with Mexico, to France. Now, Alabama has always answered the call. It's what we do. It's who we are. But I also can't help but notice the difference in tone from the White House 107 years ago versus now. I mean, when President Wilson perceived that the local border towns were threatened, he determined to take immediate and drastic action. He mobilized over 115,000 troops. He sent them down south at what he called maximum strength. He even named the action the American Punitive Expedition. Well before the days of real-time news and the level of infrastructure that we have today, the president at the time felt that even that remote region of America was a place of sovereignty, that there were American interests and, yes, American citizens who had to be preserved in good order and somebody was going to pay a price for it. So fast forward to today. Our Vice President Kamala Harris was allegedly appointed the border czar soon after taking office. There is zero evidence that she has taken that to heart. Her attack was first and really only to travel to South American countries, to assess why people were leaving there. Who cares why they're leaving there? The fact is, the problem is they are showing up here. President Biden declared an end to Title 42 while almost simultaneously reducing funding to the Customs and Border Patrol. And the Border Patrol Union is calling for his head and pointing out that the evidence is clear that we are being overrun. It's not rocket science. It's not hard. Close the border, build a wall, upfund law enforcement, put displaced civilian camps on the Mexican side of the border, remove the carrot of asylum unless they first apply for it in other countries they've already passed through, and then tell the United Nations that you're going to cut their funding unless they start doing what they say they do in other places to care for refugees. And then tell Mexico they either shut it down on their side or they face sanctions. And then the coup de grace, put one Tomahawk missile into a fentanyl lab on the southern side of the border, and by God, you will see a change in tone, and the border crossings will slow to a trickle. I feel certain that Alabamians as a whole would support a plan like that. I mean, why? Because we've had a proven track record of taking action whenever action is needed. Alabama has been there for our border friends many times, and we will do it again. We respond ably as a state when our federal government actually has a plan and is willing to put it into action with maximum strength. And that's a wrap for the Right Side Way. I'm telling you, man, it's not rocket science. It's really not. It's not. I mean, close the border, modify the way you handle things and process people, build a wall, provide additional funding to law enforcement, not to the IRS, and put displaced civilian camps on the southern side of the border and tell people, you better stop it on that side of the border or you're not going to like the results when we start sanctioning your country. Period. I mean, it's where we are. Why should we face a crisis because someone else is not willing to do their part? All right, folks, Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. Send the Alabamians, that's what I say. We'll be right back. Yeah. And we are back. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. Solid conservative and just plain right. Saving the world, one soundbite at a time. By the way, that Boomer, that monologue I just did a moment ago, I talked about the boys from Alabama going to the southern border, then to World War I. Mm-hmm. So the unit that I commanded in the Guard, I've talked about it before, was the 167th Infantry, which was part of that group that went to the southern border.
Really? And
I'm wearing my shirt today, by the way.
Oh.
My 4th Alabama shirt is on right now.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, man.
Go to those text lines because it's
good Lord.
Slammed.
So this is where I say, you got a sound effect? Boomer, the text lines blew up. Thank you very much. We work so well together. All right, so listen, lots of text. You want to text in, you're welcome to it. 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. If you text in for the very first time, which there are new people every single day is what I'm noticing, and you want to join the hundreds of people that are in our text applications, then just text the word Rightside to 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. And for the very first time, you'll get a message back that says, hey, welcome you Right Side Ruffian, and tell us your first name, where you're from. We'll plug you in. John from Huntsville. Phil, did you hear that Elon Musk has already named somebody new CEO? I did indeed. But he also asked me, Phil, when Title 42 ended, it was like saying, come on over, you're the next contestant on The Price is Right. And that's exactly right. They're running down the aisles. Have you ever seen that movie World War Z, Bummer?
Oh, yes, of course.
Brad Pitt?
Yeah.
By the way, the book World War Z was totally different than the movie.
So I've heard. I haven't read it, but completely different.
I'm not a huge science fiction, reader, but that was an epic book. It was so cool.
Really?
It was extremely. Yeah, it was like that's the way. If there were really a zombie apocalypse, that's what would happen. Anyway. But in the movie, do you seen the scene where the zombies are just like they're fast zombies?
Very fast.
By the way, fast zombies are the worst.
That would be terrible.
I'll take a slow zombie any day.
Give me
of the
the
week.
slow zombies any day.
Come on. But anyway, the fast zombies just piled up on each other. They climb the wall.
Oh, man. That was a big wall.
That was a freak show.
Oh.
All right. But anyway, that's what it feels like right now. Donna from Coleman, if you have the power to keep America buying drugs with no interference, even forcing American citizens to stand down and allow their transport across your ranch, sure, this is a marketable service, a very profitable way to sell America to the enemy. She's right. Jeff from Hazel Green, D.C. would burn to the ground if Liar Liar Pants on Fire took effect. Okay. The Barry from Fultondale says, Phil, one of the things I'm worried about is all the disease they're bringing over. Well, that could be a thing. I believe they have medical screening, but that's when they see them. Raven from Russellville says, send the Alabamians. This old Alabamian stands ready and able. Some parts of me don't work so well anymore, but my index finger on my right hand still works fine.
Yep.
Raven is determined to shoot somebody. I see a new texter up there, bud. You want to grab that with the top of the string? Gray Falcon from Ardmore says, Phil, this is not going to be popular, but you and I both know the United States already has the technology to seal the southern border effectively now. Sealing the border is not going to be popular. It's going to be ugly. It's going to hurt some people's feelings. It's not going to be politically correct, but it will be a sovereign border, and we have the technology. I agree. I mean, the reality is he's right. We have the ability to put in sensors, drones, any number of other effects that could monitor and keep track, and at the same time building a physical barrier of a wall. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's really not. It's just a matter of will, and that's the problem. What do we got here? Jeff from Indiana already texted in. It's not a crisis. It's Biden's plan. And things are going swimmingly in the eyes and minds of Democrats who wish to destroy the United States as we know it now. I'll be honest with you, Jeff, you cannot say this is not intentional. You're right. And in fact, Charlene just texted in and said they don't want to stop it. JT, Lacey Springs, obviously nothing learned from history. Sanctions, way past due. I'm with you, man. Jim from Huntsville says, spot on, Senator. Thank you, sir. Got a brand new listener. Is that Bart from Maryland? Hello, Bart from Maryland. Glad you're in the string, brother. And we got Racing from Hawaii and Jeff from Indiana and Bart from Maryland. And
I like it.
This is wow. Steve from Tennessee.
Yes.
We hadn't heard from Steve from Tennessee in a while. Rosalind from Harvest says, I have to disagree about the people on the southern border being displaced. They have chosen to be there. Okay, you know what? That is a reasonable point. Rosalind, or is it Rosalind or Rose Ellen? Maybe Rose Ellen. Anyway, the bottom line is, that's a great point. Displaced civilians mean they've been forced out of a spot. Oh my gosh, she just nailed me on the terminology. I stand corrected. Nonetheless, they are transients. All right, folks, Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Coming up next, Justin Bogey, Alabama Policy Institute. We'll talk about Alabama's immigration laws that I helped to pass back in 2013. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid, conservative, and just plain right, covering down on some major ground across the northern half of the most beautiful state in the nation. That would be Alabama. I'm talking about this show goes way on down south of Birmingham, up north of Huntsville, Tuscaloosa, back to Gadsden parts of Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, thrown in just for good measure. Well, listen, so those of y'all been with the show for even 5 minutes know that I spent 8 years in the Alabama State Senate. And in 2013, 2013, I may have been 2012 actually, we passed, and what was in the early days of people realizing what the southern border was becoming, we passed a state law. It was known as the Beeson-Hammond Act, named after State Senator Scott Beeson and then Representative Mickey Hammond. They were the ones who sponsored it, but the Beeson-Hammond Act was basically, it was a stab at saying, hey, federal government, if you're not going to enforce your own laws, we'll do it for you. Well, looking around us now, states are doing things like Texas and Florida, and others are doing things right now. And yet, you can imagine back then, I've told you before, there were protests in the Capitol, in the State House. We were being, shoved around in the hallways. I mean, it was just screaming and end of the world kind of stuff. And then, of course, the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, all of them took us to court, and parts of it went away. Well, I could not remember for the life of me where it stands right now. So we passed the act, and then I know it went to court, and then I know that parts of it were blocked, and the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, I think, blocked several. Anyway, the bottom line is this. The Alabama Policy Institute exists to provide good, credible research and information about matters of conservative public policy. And so I asked Stephanie Smith yesterday, can you guys take a look and see where we stand? I mean, what parts of the law are still intact and what's out there and how does it compare to Florida's new law? And lo and behold, here we are. Justin Bogey, analyst with the Alabama Policy Institute, is on the phone right now, did some research overnight. Hey, Justin, how you doing, man?
Hey, Phil, I'm doing well. It's good to be with you this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for making some time, buddy. I appreciate that. Listen, I got a copy. Stephanie forwarded me what you were able to put together. So there are parts of that law that still are intact, but there are parts that were enjoined permanently, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I can just run through some of that if you want me to. But, basically in 2013, as you mentioned, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals basically said that certain parts couldn't stand. The state reached an agreement with, some of the interested parties that had filed lawsuits against us. And those provisions that were repealed, there was a requirement that schools had to verify the immigration status of new students. That went away. There was a penalty for basically if you went and tried to solicit an unauthorized immigrant from working, you could be held criminally liable for that. You couldn't provide a ride or provide a lease to an illegal immigrant at the time under the original law, and that was repealed. No one was allowed to enter into contracts with undocumented aliens. And then there was one that made it a crime to fail to register your immigration status. You're supposed to register that federally. I can't imagine there's a whole lot of illegal immigrants who are, wanting to admit that they're in the country illegally and going through that process. But that was one of them. But several parts are still on the books. At least it's hard to tell exactly how strictly they're being enforced, but there are some if you want me to run through those as well.
Yeah, let's talk about the parts that were blocked first. So bottom line is, at one point, I remember this, we had it down because there were school systems where some communities had a massive influx of undocumented migrants, and they were. I remember meeting with one school superintendent, and he told me, he said, we don't want to turn kids away. He said, but we recently couldn't hire another teacher because we had to hire an interpreter instead. And you look at that kind of stuff, you think, man, this is burdensome. So yeah, the school systems were being told you have to verify status, and that went away. Now schools are not verifying status per se. That's great, and you can imagine the strain that's put on school systems. Well, and the other piece about hiring people or soliciting them to work. I mean, you can't just go. See a group of guys standing downtown and pull up and ask them, do you want to work on my farm today or something like that, which, I mean, truthfully, that happens. It's just a fact of life. But you're not supposed to do that now without checking their status here as an illegal or non-illegal alien. Federal law actually made it a crime in the flow of traffic or something like that as you were trying to
get someone to come work with you for the day or whatever the case may have been. But that portion went away as well.
Wow. Okay. All right. So several pieces of this did go away, but there's still some of it that's there. I mean, there's still things that deal with employers and law enforcement and all that. So run down the list of what still stands in the law.
Sure. One of the more attention grabbing at the time was this provision that basically a police officer could stop someone and ask them for their status. That's been rolled back a little bit. You have to have a reason to conduct a traffic stop or an arrest or a detention, but at that point, police officers can still try to ascertain their immigration status. At that point, the proof of residency before someone can vote that remained, and I think the legislature actually recodified that back in 2020, I believe. So that one's still on the books. They cannot receive state or local government benefits. I believe they still can receive federal benefits. Of course, that's a different story, but that certainly puts a strain on state resources either way. And then this is one that's similar to something Florida is doing. There's a requirement that employers must use the E-Verify system, employers of all sizes. In Florida, it's more than 25 employees, I believe. But in Alabama, any employer is supposed to go through that process and verify the immigration status before they hire someone. Other ones of note, legal immigrants are barred from attending public universities. Florida had something similar, education-related, but they kind of pared it back. And then this is an interesting one. Now, I don't know if it's actually happening or not, but the Alabama Department of Homeland Security has the authority to actually hire officers to enforce the immigration laws of the 2021 Act. 2011 Act. You haven't heard a lot about it, but that's still on the books.
Yeah, that's so. A lot of folks don't realize we actually have an Alabama Department of Homeland Security, and I remember that we put a provision in there saying that they were authorized to hire immigration officers, like purely dedicated to the question of immigration enforcement. But I think some of the ones you just named, I'm glad to see they're still in there. But I think it's also interesting because barring illegal immigrants from enrolling in public universities, well, that's because they're paid for with tax dollars. And granted, you pay tuition to be there, but then again, they're also subsidized with tax dollars.
Right, they're getting heavy subsidies. I mean, look at the education trust fund budget.
Yeah,
it's a whole lot of money that we're putting towards public universities.
Oh yeah, higher ed's got their teeth in that one. But yes, but it's but then the one about state or local government benefits, I thought that was one of the best pieces in there, because what it basically means is they can't come here and consume benefits that are state funded. And does that apply to things even though they may have federal match dollars attached to them, like Medicaid or do you know, or like a SNAP or the WIC program?
I don't know exactly how it would work because my understanding is that they can take part in those federal Medicaid, and I believe they can get some of those other assistance programs under federal law, but I assume they wouldn't get the state matching portion of that or something along those lines. It's sort of unclear.
Well, but so I remember when we passed this, and this is probably one of the more explosive times in the 8 years I was down there, maybe the most explosive. I mean, the level of tension in the State House, the number of protesters, the people lining the hallways and trying to block us from getting down the hall to vote, and just on and on and on, calling us names, and it was ridiculous. Now you worked in Montgomery for a period of time. Do you recall? Were you in the State House when this happened?
I was there when the bill was actually passed, and I have a vague recollection of people lining the halls and us being told to stay in our offices and some of that. Now, I believe some of the really more robust protests kind of happened later in early 2012, kind of after the dust had settled a little bit, and they started trying to get the legislature to roll some of this back. So I may have missed. Certainly remember the tensions that were going on, and really that was happening around the State House at the time. It was, certainly something you wouldn't forget.
No, I don't. I distinctly remember getting elbowed in the ribs intentionally by someone who was trying to keep me from getting down the hall to vote. All right, how do we compare? By the way, I think we were ahead of our time. I mean, this is 12 years ago we passed this thing, or maybe 10. Anyway, somewhere thereabouts.
Yeah, about 12 years ago now. Yeah,
we were about a decade ahead of most everybody else in terms of passing something like this. And granted, it went to court, but now you see Florida just this past week signed into law a pretty major piece of legislation that's in many ways very similar to what we passed 10 years ago. What do you know about that?
Yeah, you're right, and I would actually say, at the time that before it was kind of pared back, the Alabama law was really stronger than Florida's and probably stronger than what any other state has attempted to do since then. But yeah, the Florida law certainly strengthens their policies. As I alluded to, they've put this E-Verify policy position in there so that you have to check if you have more than 25 employees. You have to ensure the immigration status. If a business does hire illegal aliens unknowingly, they can have their business license suspended.
Wow.
It increases penalties for human smuggling, which is obviously a pretty big issue down in Florida, helping people get across from other countries or across the border. This is an interesting one that seems to be getting a lot of attention. So if a hospital receives federal Medicare, Medicaid reimbursements, they now...
Did we lose him? I think we just lost him. Well, I know the bullet point he was going for. Hey, Justin, if you can hear me, we can't hear you, bud, but I'll go ahead and wrap this up. He's right. Hospitals that receive federal and state Medicaid reimbursements must now collect and report the amount of money spent for illegal immigrants in the emergency room. So what they're saying is they want to track it. They want to know for a fact, how much money are we spending? And that's good because, part of that is you need to be able to, when later on when they say, oh, you're just looking for a problem to fit your solution. No, here's the proof that we have a problem. One of the other pieces of the Florida law that I think is great is out-of-state driver's licenses that are issued to illegals in another state like California, they are not valid in Florida. That makes sense. So basically they're not providing any of what's known as comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, or reciprocity, however you want to say it. The bottom line is we typically, we accept a Georgia driver's license. We accept a Florida driver's license. We accept a California driver's license, but they're not going to accept it if somebody does not have legal documentation. So you cannot use that photo ID for something if you've already been shown to also be in the country illegally. Well, listen, he lost his signal apparently and got cut off, but I'll just say, Justin Bogey, thank you for looking that up. I'm glad to find that the law that we passed a decade ago is still largely in effect. There are portions of it that were some of the toughest parts, like making the schools have to also verify status of the kids that are in the schools. Those got enjoined by the courts. I remember the Supreme Court did not hear Alabama's appeal on the 11th Circuit's issues, but nonetheless, the U.S. Supreme Court, but nonetheless, the bulk of it remained in place. And I think we led the way in some ways. All right, listen, we're going to take a break right now. We will come right back and sort of keep this going. Bama on the border. So what did our lieutenant governor just say about what he thinks that Alabama should be doing? And by the way, what's the latest on the border and what's our U.S. delegation having to say about it? Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid and conservative and just plain right. Making it cool to be a conservative. Text lines are going crazy. Cameron from Decatur says, it's a long one. Okay, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get all of this, Cameron. But he says they are not migrants. They're not asylum seekers. They are illegal immigrants. Even leaders of the Dem-controlled cities say the federal government under Biden has failed us. And he goes on, but good thoughts, Cameron. Appreciate you texting in. Steve from Owens Crossroads says, according to 60 Minutes, the E-Verify system is poor and widely circumvented. Not that I'm a fan of the show any longer. Okay, I don't know what that means. He's not a fan of Rightside Radio or of 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes. I feel better. I thought, did we just lose Steve from Owens Crossroads? I'm not sure what I did to offend him. Thanks, Steve. Bart from Maryland did hear us giving the shout out. He said, I heard your show on the radio 3 weeks ago on a trip to Huntsville and Fort Benning. Haven't missed a show since. Glad I can listen online. Thanks for the shout out. Have a good weekend, gentlemen. You too, Bart from Maryland. We appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. Dwight from Decatur, he said repealed. I think he meant struck down. Well, okay, that's fair. But Justin's not a lawyer, but you're right. I heard him say it, and I let it go right on by. But he's right. The reality is the court struck certain portions of it down, and it did not allow them to stand. And then Rayson from Hawaii is on the line. We appreciate that, Rayson. Glad you're out there, man. He says, incredible, informative, educational program. Thank you, brother. We appreciate that. So listen, this whole first part of the Triple Dipper, which is going to last through the top of the hour just for a bit, it's called Bama on the Border. So here's an interview just about 3 weeks ago. Yellowhammer News reported this one. Our Lieutenant Governor, Will Ainsworth, who's been in studio here before, Lieutenant Governor Ainsworth actually was on Fox and Friends, the Fox News Channel's weekend show. They were at Talladega Superspeedway for the Geico 500, and he sat down with the hosts and he talked to them. And part of what they talked about was the border and Alabama's reaction to the border. He did point out that Governor Ivey, and by the way, she's not the most outspoken, the most deliberative, but there have been certain things I've been glad she did. One of which was she had Alabama joined to the the American Governor's Border Strike Force, meaning that we will collaborate, that we will provide assistance as best we can. So we are part of a coordinated effort among states to combat illegal immigration, if you will. That's good stuff, and I'm glad we're part of it. So we're there. That's what's one piece. Bama on the border, yes. Our governor has put us into the American Governor's Border Strike Force. And then you've got Ainsworth talking as lieutenant governor. He says, I'm going to give you a local story about how it's impacting Alabama. He said, and he's from Guntersville. He said, I split my time between Guntersville and Montgomery. Just a small town, the Guntersville. He said, just last month, which would be March, we had several teenage and college kids die from a fentanyl overdose with a drug batch that was tied back to Mexico. He said, when you look at the amount of drugs that are coming into America and President Biden's failed policies, he has not protected the border. And so at the end of the day, states are having to step up and we're having to do the job of the federal government. He is spot on, and that was a tragic moment when these kids all died from fentanyl overdoses. And yeah, that's streaming across the border right now. It's like more every single month. The amount of seizures that we're seeing clearly indicate that the amount that we're not seeing is probably of epic levels. And Ainsworth went on to talk about the fact that we are assisting with security operations. He says we're some of the first to send boots on the ground. We're sending people from the Alabama National Guard. We're sending law enforcement. We're going to put people there. He said, I think, making sure that we're actually going to be committed to getting the wall built. And then he said Alabama's going to step up to the plate and support those border states, and we continue to send people there. That's our lieutenant governor and our governor saying, we're in, y'all. We're in. Alabama will be there. And it's a good thing because when you look at some of the stories that are out there right now, PJ Media picked up on one that I talked about briefly yesterday. There are estimates of upwards of 150,000 illegal aliens already stacked up right across the border, literally just piled up on the other side of the border, prepared to come through because last night Title 42 ended. And this article says the Biden administration is not ready, not by a long shot. Now here's a new thing. This news broke this morning. It says right here in this article from PJ Media dated 2 days ago. It says orders have gone out to all Border Patrol sectors. If there's no room in your shelters, then agents are to begin what they call a safe release of illegal aliens to the city streets. What that basically means is we're not processing them. They're gonna let them in, and they're gonna put them on a bus, drive them out in the middle of a city, and just say, "Go, get out, get out." There's no documentation. There's no, even though it's not much, they're saying, right now they're supposed to appear for a future court date. Well, the reality is that's not going to happen. The plan was just start letting them go. Just open the gates. Just let them all in. We can't handle it. Well, a federal judge this morning enjoined that and said, no, you cannot do that. That will not happen. And so at the very least, a federal judge has said you will have to process these people. All right, folks, Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. Alabama's syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios, man. We got the local, the state, the national, covering down on all the issues. And like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Hour number 2. Where'd hour number 1 go? It's hour number 2?
Yeah, here it is, number 2.
It must be a Friday. We're flying through this on the way to the weekend. Hey, listen, glad you guys are with us. Number 1 of the Triple Dipper. We're still in it. Bama on the border. So, yeah, the story I had last, right before we went to the break, PJ Media reports that there are reports of upwards of 150,000 illegal aliens staged right across the border at various crossing sites, just waiting for Title 42 to go away last night. Now, here's the one good thing, and since the music was kicking in, I want to make sure I repeat this because I'm not sure everybody could have heard it, but the reality is there was a plan in place. Literally, it was a plan in place. Like, this is a plan? Like, what's your plan? Well, my plan is to basically do nothing. That's a plan. Okay. That's what we had. The Biden administration had sent out to all the Border Patrol sectors that if you don't have enough shelter spots anymore, then just start letting them loose. No processing, no giving them their future court date, no nothing. Just let them go. Just open the gates. Just step back and watch it all happen. And you're shaking your head. What are you thinking?
I'm just thinking of that the whole thing of, yes, it's all the illegals coming in. But another thing that I would be worried about is who is in the illegals that are coming in from the other countries that could just be coming in to do God knows what.
And that's part of the discussion. I mean, at the very least, you're checking.
Right.
You're looking at them and going, MS-13 gang member tattoo guy on your face.
Yeah.
Let's talk a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Get their DNA sample or fingerprints or something and run it.
Right.
Do the biometrics. At least record who you got.
That's what in my head. I'm like, man, who's coming in because they know they can just walk right in right now without getting even checked.
Not only that, but what do they do with all the undocumented, unaccompanied minors?
Oh, right.
I mean, kids coming in, we don't need room for it. Just let them go. Just let them go, man. So we're going to have, like, street orphans? Like we had the
like
Sully
Kenya,
or
yeah,
Mully
like
here the other day?
Mm-hmm.
I look at it and think, this is not a plan. Like, you've been in office for 2 years. And by the way, when he so-called won the election, big asterisks, when he so-called won the election, at the very least, when an administration takes office, they have already laid the foundation. They're supposed to be campaigning for over a year on what they'll do when they get in office. In other words, they formed their policy before they get there. And then they take office and they put their policy into effect. We are 2.5 years from the day that Biden took office. Well, not quite 2.5, but close. And we're definitely 2.5 from the time he got elected. And then on top of that, he had a year prior to that. So let's say he had 3.5 years to form his border policy. Apparently his border policy was, I kid you not, was do nothing. That's what it appears. Alejandro Mayorkas will tell us.
Let them in. They'll vote for us.
Oh, you think?
Not
in Alabama.
Not in Alabama, but they're just going to drive them there and be like, hey, yeah, go sign that sheet of paper. Vote for me.
I did see that. I don't know if we said it when Justin Bogey was on the phone, but that was one of the things that was upheld in our state law that we passed in 2011 was that illegals cannot. You have to actually have proof of citizenship to vote.
Nice.
To be registered to vote. So yeah. I tell you what, Boomer, you got that clip from Katie Britt. So coming up Monday, if things continue the way they're supposed to, Senator Katie Britt will be on the show with us. To talk about her thoughts. But listen, last night as I was preparing for the show, because I actually got done last night, I actually slept past 5 o'clock this morning. It was great.
Good job.
It was awesome. But as I was preparing the show last night and getting my resources together, I stumbled across a video that was like only a few hours old of Senator Britt. Now this is since I'm doing Bama on the border, I thought it's a good idea to see what our delegation is saying. How are they addressing the issue? And I'm going to tell you right now, I watched her video and I texted her communications guy and I said, that video was fire. That video was fire. I mean, so I'm going to play it. And the clip is a little longer than I would normally play. All right. It just is. It's about 2.5 minutes. But it's worth it. This is your U.S. Senator addressing the Biden administration based upon her experience at the border. Play it, Boomer.
I went to the border 3 times so far in my tenure in the United States Senate. I want to put that in perspective for you. So I went 3 times in 2 months, whereas Joe Biden has only been 3 hours in 2 years. And when we went, we asked for the real, unvarnished truth. And what I am here to tell you is that we have a humanitarian and a national security crisis at our border every single day. As a mom, it was gut-wrenching to watch women pregnant attempt to cross the border with multiple tiny children behind them. To look into the eyes of our CBP agents who said, look, I pulled a woman from this very river last week who was pregnant with twins. She drowned. As a mom, to sit across from a young woman who told me it wasn't that she was raped every day, it was how many times a day she was raped at the hands of the drug cartels. As I've traveled the great state of Alabama, sitting across from a parent who told me he lost his son to fentanyl poisoning. When in the world is this administration going to wake up? We must seal and secure our border, put back in policies that just make sense and that keep Americans safe and our communities strong. Listen, what we are about to see happen over the next few days is going to be catastrophic, but it is nothing that we didn't know was coming. On January 26th, Joe Biden came out and said, we are ending the public health emergency and Title 42 on May 11th. Now, I want you to pay close attention to this timeline, because then on March 9th, he came out with his budget that cut the Department of Homeland Security by 1%. Now, let me tell you something. President Biden wasn't afraid of increasing things when he thought they needed to be, because he increased EPA by 19%. That decrease made it even more challenging to secure our border, to combat fentanyl, and to make sure that we put these traffickers in their place and enforce our existing immigration laws. There is no doubt that it is open season for human traffickers, drug cartels, and terrorists. I plead with the administration, the men and women behind me and in this building, we have real solutions. Come to the table. Let's secure our border. Let's put the American people first. Let's put the safety of our children and communities all across this country before anything else. Thank you.
Man, your thoughts?
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, she laid it all out there, and the passion behind it.
Yeah.
And just to hear from firsthand what she saw.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, why are we not doing anything about it?
She was spot on, you know, and I'll be honest, if a day comes that I don't agree with something she says, I'll say that too, but I could not find a single thing in what she said that I disagreed with.
Right.
In that particular case, she was nailing it. And she was nailing it from having gone down there 3 times and then also talking to her own constituents and then dealing with things in D.C. and watching the budgets. As Department of Homeland Security gets their budget cut, he's raising the Environmental Protection Agency. I mean, for the love of God, where's the EPA on the southern border right now as literally you're looking at entire fields of trash from illegals that are just dumping it as they come across the border?
Exactly.
So story here in the Daily Wire, dated a couple of days ago, was just really awesome. So states can make a difference. You know, Alabama's got its laws in place. Our Alabama delegation is active. I've got comments here from virtually every single one of them. Congressman Strong, even though there's no chance it's going to get passed, he introduced legislation to reinstate the border wall construction. Glad on him for doing that. It's symbolic, really, if you get down to it, because there's no way it's going to pass. But I'm glad he's doing it. Our delegation is speaking up with unanimity, with the exception of our only Democrat. Our only Democrat, Terry Sewell, is quiet because it doesn't fit the narrative, right? But Texas, Daily Wire reports that Texas has now got its National Guard. They are trained. They have 10,000 specially trained National Guard members that are part of what they call their Texas Tactical Border Force, and an additional 1,200 Texas Department of Public Safety troopers, all on the border. In addition to what CBP has, and in addition to the Biden administration sending troops down most recently. And they're looking at cascades of up to, 10 to 13,000 expected to start. They've been over 10,000 the last 3 days in a row. They've set new records the last 3 days. And then on top of that, though, the Texas National Guard soldiers, and I watched a video of it, they were in riot gear blocking illegals from coming ashore, not even letting them up the bank. I was so glad. Spreading out that concertina wire, and Governor Abbott said, great work by Texas National Guard and the Texas DPS. He says Biden sent 1,500 troops to the border to do their paperwork. Texas deployed trained soldiers and troopers to take real action and respond to the crisis. Well, we've got our own Alabama delegation from the state legislature that went down there. We had Senator Lance Bell on the phone the other day talking about his trip down there and what he saw. I did notice CBS 42 had a piece, came out a couple days ago, saying that when they were on the trip, they were also there to help understand better what's going on with fentanyl trafficking. And he said that officials in Texas and with the CBP commended Alabama for passing new laws strengthening the penalties on fentanyl. That's part of what we can do. We can make it more difficult for them to do the things they've been doing. Well, listen, folks, Alabama, we are tied in. We are part of the governor's border task force. We are sending our own National Guard, our own delegation, our U.S. delegation, and our state leaders are engaged in the process. There is certainly more that can be done. What we're seeing right now is a crisis of leadership as much as anything. It's a crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's a national security crisis, but it's a crisis of leadership in D.C. Unbelievable. And the things they're starting to put back in place now are almost too little too late. But what's crazy is they're also reinstating policies of the Trump administration that had been working that they had rescinded when they first took office. Anyway, all right, Bama on the border. Just so you know, I thought, you know what, we're going to do the same kind of topic 2 days in a row, but it was important for you to hear that your own state is fully engaged on the process because every state's a border state right now. All right, take us to the break, Boom. We'll do that right now. We'll come right back. We got to lighten the mood. I got to tell you guys about the Pinocchio thing I just found on Twitter. All right, Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right, making it so cool to be a conservative. And yeah, so the text lines have blown up. Before I go any further, Boomer, I got to tell you what I found on Twitter, though. So
Yeah, what's that?
just to lighten the moment for a moment, just to lighten it up a little bit. So
Oh boy.
yeah. So it's one of those kind of random things that I follow on Twitter. It's called Historic Vids, and it's basically like it takes like a little vignette out of history you might not have known, or
Okay.
gives you a little weird history moment.
Is this a weird history moment?
Kinda, yeah.
Oh, boy.
So you know the original Disney Pinocchio movie, right?
Oh, yeah.
The old cartoon
The old-
version.
yeah.
Yeah. Like, Dancing Without His Strings, that kind of thing. All right. So there's a picture here. It's got a picture of it. So Disney, apparently when the movie premiered, which I got to look back and see, but it's the 50s, I think. When the movie premiered, Disney hired, and it refers to them as little people. So,
Okay. Yeah.
Disney hired some little people to dress as Pinocchio, put them up on top of the marquee in front of the theater to dress as Pinocchio and wave at the people during the premiere. So you had little people dressed as Pinocchio up there waving.
All right.
Then it says they left them up there with enough food and wine for the day. But by late afternoon, they were all naked and drunk and screaming swear words at people.
Really?
Who thought this was a good idea?
No way.
It's a hot day. You put a group of little people up there. And
The food wasn't eaten, obviously.
I don't
and
know.
all the wine was drank.
the
So
wine was definitely imbibed. And it says they got naked and drunk and started screaming profanity at the crowd.
they're sitting up there yelling at people.
Naked.
Naked.
And drunk.
With the big Pinocchio behind them.
Exactly. Giant Pinocchio on the wall behind him. God, that just
That's
got all
funny.
over me. That just wore me out, man. Oh, God. Like, who thought that ranked right up there with putting Dylan Mulvaney on a beer can? I'm just saying. Somebody's what were you thinking, giving them bottles of wine? I don't know. I thought it'd be a great idea. It was part of the deal.
It was part of the deal.
Yeah. Text lines have blown up. You want to grab any? I'll go down the line too.
Samal, the truck driver,
Yeah, what'd he say?
he says, have the capture aliens dig a moat and fill it with the gators. Yeah, I'm guessing he like the gators that are all up here in
So put them to
Alabama.
work is what you're saying.
That's what he's saying right there. Put
Dig
them to
the
work.
moat, and then we'll fill it with gators.
Yeah, they can have all of our gators that come up here in
All of
Alabama.
our Huntsville alligators
That's
that we've been
right.
seeing lately. Yeah. There was another article, by the way, about a gator just off the beach down in Orange Beach area, I think it was.
Man,
Like he was like a 6 or 8 footer, just swimming.
just hanging
Hanging
out.
Yep.
Just hanging out.
Donna from Hartselle, she says, "This is Donna from Hartselle. I'm afraid those children are going to end up in the sex trade." And I agree. You're right. Nothing funny about that. You're absolutely right. A lot of those kids that we were talking about, if there's going to release them, yeah. By the way, speaking of which, I just saw on the screen here in the studio. I think this one was on the Fox side. Yeah, it was. It said that that judge had enjoined. I said that a minute ago. The judge had
Right.
enjoined that plan to just release them without any processing at all. They call them street releases, and the judge enjoined that. The White House has announced they will fight the judge's order. What does that tell you? They want to release them into the streets.
What?
I mean, the White House could have looked at that and gone, "Whew, we got saved from ourselves. Good deal.
Exactly.
Let's take that as a closet win and go on." No, they are going to fight. They're going to fight that because they are determined that they want to just release them into the streets.
So what are they trying to do?
They're trying to destroy our country, in my
Yeah.
opinion. That's where I'm at. I mean,
That's what it looks like.
when you take the economy, the energy sector, the embarrassment on the world stage, and the level of taxation he's trying to increase, and what he's doing by trying to make the climate the new war, and then the southern border, and then wokeism in the military. Look at it all at one time, and you cannot help but say they are determined to remake America into a different form of
Completely
of a country
different
it
than what
is.
we were
Yeah.
built on.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, Badger from Athens,
Yeah, what'd
he
he say?
says happy Friday.
Hey.
So that makes me happy.
Happy Friday to you, Badger. We appreciate you. Jeff from Hazel Green. He said it was in a song by U2 a few years ago that said, quote, "Let's hope the Russians love their children too. It seems the only use Joe Biden has for children is for sniffing their hair." Yes, which is a creepy thing we've seen him do multiple times. Our children and grandchildren pay for these choices. Yes, they do. Bill from Hartselle says Pinocchio was a child trafficking movie, came out in 1949. A child trafficking movie?
Really?
Stop it, Bill. Do
Well,
that.
real quick, Jeremy from Huntsville, before we go out,
Yeah.
he says, what about the poo-poos? I work in construction and 10 porta potties smell really bad. I just wonder, I can't imagine what it smells like out there.
I don't know, bro. I mean, is there a Porta-John left east of the Mississippi right now? Because they're probably shipping them all out there.
They probably are.
All right, folks. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. We'll be back with more ruminations. We're switching gears to number 2 on the Triple Dipper, Military Minded. We'll be right back. we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Covering down on some major ground across the northern half of the most beautiful state out there in the whole union. That would be Alabama. I'm talking about this show sends its signal way on down south of Birmingham, up north of Huntsville, Tuscaloosa, all the way back over east to Gadsden, and then even parts of Georgia, Tennessee, and Mississippi thrown in just for good measure. Hey, listen, you hear the advertising when we go to break. A lot of times you're catching the ads for things like Just Love Coffee and ZLA Solutions and others. So let me tell you this: we are a separate business. Rightside Radio is a standalone entity. We are not owned by the stations that we're on. When you hear us, just know that we're sending our signal to multiple stations, and we exist on the basis of ad sales and other forms of fundraising. And so, yeah, the reality is, if you want to advertise with us, you got to call us, and we would love to have you on the team. We got some great advertisers. We got room to add some more on our website, rightsideradio.org. If you go to where it says advertising and contact, click on it. You can send us a message, and we will get back in touch with you ASAP. If we stand for the things that you believe you stand for and you want to advertise your business, we'd love to talk to you. So, yeah, rightsideradio.org. Send us a message through the advertising tab. We'll be right on it. I got a caller on the line real quick. Let me do that. Colin from Decatur. Hey, Colin, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Phil. I just wanted to chime in on the whole border situation.
Yeah.
With some prior experience in law enforcement here. Not going to focus on gangs that are coming across because everybody knows that's happening, but I will say when I was in law enforcement, there were a lot of wrecks that I worked that unfortunately there was a lot of illegals causing the car accidents, and quite a few of them were actually fatalities, and not a whole lot got done once they got into the ICE holding, and then they'd get pulled out, and they basically would get a slap on the wrist. Very few of them even got deported.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sure that's true, man.
I'm concerned that stuff like that's going to skyrocket, in addition to some violent crime that's just going to occur.
Were you in local law enforcement? Were you state law enforcement? What'd you do?
I was in Texas law enforcement. I was part of the state troopers in Texas.
Wow. Well, thanks for your service there. Appreciate that. I just read an article, and it may have been in my stack that I didn't get to a minute ago, that one of the issues they're having right now is they're having to pull so many Texas state troopers from the northern parts of the state to the southern that it's leaving wrecks unattended, and they have a slower response time for things in the northern part of the state now.
Yeah, people I know that are still in it have said that it's going to get significantly worse, especially if they do just mass release them.
Well, hey, man, Colin, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Good insights, and thanks again for your service. We appreciate that very much.
Have a good one.
You too. The other thing I know I've seen, because I had a friend that has experienced this, is illegals who are driving not getting insurance because they don't want to put themselves on the radar, so they fly under the radar best they can. But then when they pop up incidentally, like an accident, then the people left holding the bag are the ones who were not at fault in the accident, who did have insurance, but now their insurance is having to pay for it all, as opposed to the person who caused the accident. And it's a mess, man. It has trickle down effects everywhere. I mean, don't think for a second this is a crisis on the border, and oh, by the way, how are we going to feed them and where are they going to go? No, then it's things like less law enforcement to respond in other places. National Guardsmen who are not now at home or capable of responding to a tornado event or a natural disaster. You've got situations with, industries like insurance. You've got the inability to process people who committed a crime because we have no record of where they're from. It's a mess. All right, let me jump on, though, to the next part of the Triple Dipper. So, military-minded. Let's just change the tone here for a minute and talk about some things. The military is near and dear to my heart. You guys all know that. 30 years total of service between my deployments and time in the Guard and Reserve and all of it. Many of you the same way. Lots of folks out there that have served in various capacities in our branches of the military. We got a lot of installations. Alabama's very military friendly. I mean, look down all the way from Fort Rucker down there in the Wiregrass region. In the river region, we got, of course, Maxwell Air Force Base. And then you've got Anniston Army Depot, the Fort McClellan National Guard Training Center, Redstone Arsenal, You got major installations all over this state. Well, some of the things that are happening, we'll start off with this. News around the military is one of them is the renamings. We've talked about it. Well, the renamings are now picking up speed. So Fort Rucker is now officially Fort Novacell. I was talking to a great guy down in Dothan not long ago, and he was telling me he was part of the naming commission, and they tried to get very active. I thought Fort Novacell, who was Novacell? Well, Novacell was a Medal of Honor winner. He was actually a Dothan guy, and he was stationed at Fort Rucker. He was an aviator. So it fits. I get it. And they've decided they have no choice but to embrace it, so let's pick one of our own. So they did, and so Fort Novacell is now the old Fort Rucker. But as of 2 days ago, we are now looking at Fort Benning and Fort Hood have officially gone through the name change process. So Fort Hood, those of y'all that were stationed out there with 1st Cav, Fort Hood, or 3rd ACR for that matter, Fort Hood is now Fort Cavazos. And my first thought was, did they do that because they were close to the southern border? They wanted to, because General Richard Cavazos was a Texas-born Mexican-American, is what the article I've got here from military.com says. But I will say this. At the very least, he was a pretty dynamic individual. He was I believe, a 4-star. He won the Distinguished Service Cross twice in Korea and Vietnam. He was apparently a heroic individual and rallied his soldiers multiple times during major operations in both conflicts. And so, yeah, Fort Cavazos. And I've heard, by the way, and this would just be classic. So any of y'all that have served in 1st Cav, which prides itself being the biggest division in the military, has the biggest patch in the military. It's huge. It takes up like the whole upper arm. It's a monstrous patch with the horse head and the stripe on the yellow shield. But it's 1st Cav division, 1st Cavalry Division, right? They own most of that post. And now it's Fort Cavazos, which a family member of mine pointed out means they can call it Fort Cav. Ah, I see it. I see it now. I think this was not about honoring a general who won the Distinguished Service Cross twice. No, this was so you could name it Fort Cav. So yeah, 3rd Cav and 1st Cav both stationed there. Anyway, we'll see. Fort Benning, a place that I love and have served at quite a bit. Fort Benning is now Fort Moore. It's named for Lieutenant General Hal Moore. Hal Moore, who was a battalion commander, Battle of the Idrang Valley in, I think that's 27 Cav in Vietnam, the first major air assault operation and the subject of the book and the movie called We Were Soldiers. So anyway, I think the whole renaming thing is on the one hand is ridiculous. But I appreciate the attitude of the folks down in Dothan and maybe the other places too, who said, if you're going to stick us with this, if you're going to say we have to, then we're going to get involved and we're going to help pick the name. And so anyway, Fort Novacell, Fort Cavazos, Fort Moore. That's where we are right there. Then I got other stuff. So looking around the military, some of these things just interest me, all right? And I think they're going to interest some of y'all too. I don't know how many of you ground pounders out there have been 11 Bravo or an 18 series guy on the field, and you know you got overhead cover. There is nothing like knowing you've got close air support at hand. And part of that is not just the rotary wing guys flying in their Apaches or Little Bird with guns. No, part of it is the fixed wing having the A-10 Warthog. Now, for those of y'all that don't know it, have you ever seen an A-10 Warthog, Boomer? The A-10 is a, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, straight wings.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly, straight wings, big giant jets in the back.
Yes, I was about to say, in the big, it's like the big nose.
Oh,
right?
yeah, the big nose. It has teeth on the front.
Yes.
And they paint that thing usually with shark's teeth in the front.
Oh.
I mean, that's a bad plane,
That
man.
is a bad plane.
And that plane has also been upgraded now. It can carry quite a few ground attack munitions. I mean, it can drop bombs now, but it's low and slow. And they say that. They know it's low and slow. Mm-hmm. And A-10 pilots, they pride themselves on the fact that they are low and slow. I mean, you can see the pilot's eyes from the ground when he's coming in on attack run. And if you've ever seen a gun run by an A-10, it's inspiring because they come in and they've got that. I think it's a 50 caliber minigun in the front that has the Gatling gun.
Right.
And when it kicks off, everything in the front of it is gone.
Wow,
Just
it's gone.
It's a tank buster. Well, all right. So there's been a move by the Air Force to try and get rid of the A-10. Yeah, there's been a move by the Air Force for the last 5 or 6 years trying to get rid of the A-10. They don't like it. It's low and slow. They don't want to do ground attack. They want sexy, F-16s and F-22s and whatever. Well, the ground pounders love it. And there's very few things that Congress has been able to intervene and go, you're just not going to get rid of that. So Congress has been fighting back, and the A-10 is not, is still there. It's still flying close air support missions as needed. It made a name for itself in Iraq and Afghanistan. But it looks like the most recent NDAA, the National Defense Authorization, the defense budget, looks like the new NDAA is authorizing the downsizing and eventual expiring of the A-10 fleet. So by 2029, all y'all out there, all you ground pounders, all you people that put boots in the mud, and you know what it's like to have an A-10 flying overhead cover, the A-10 is going away by the year 2029 is what we're told. Dadgummit. And this year is the first year they're actually going to take an entire squadron off the inventory. So 21 A-10s are going away this year. So, dadgummit. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit, Boomer.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
I feel the same way, and I've never been around one.
I'm telling you what, man.
I like that.
Before we go to the break, I got to tell you, if I'll never forget being at Fort Knox, I think it was, Fort Knox, Kentucky, and they put on what they call $1 million minute. It's basically where they burned $1 million worth of ammunition in 1 minute of a live fire demonstration. They had, as we're sitting there, Bradley fighting vehicles come rolling up and troops come pouring out the back, and they set up everything from tows and javelins and just started lighting up targets in the range in front of it. Small arms fire, all of it. You got belt-fed M2 50 caliber machine guns blowing away things up front. And as that all began to cease, then you hear a noise, and over the speakers they start talking, and you realize what's happening next is Apache gunships are coming up over the top of the bleachers we're sitting in, and then rolling out in front of the troops and just laying waste to the ground. But the coup de grace was when you hear the pilot calling in from the A-10. And he's on a gun run, and he acquires his target and just, and I swear when he lit that thing up,
wow,
it's like his plane stopped in midair. And we sat there, and for 1 minute, it was the most devastatingly awesome thing I have ever seen. As the almighty force of the U.S. military just destroyed a range out in front of us.
The range was no more.
It was like. Yeah, why do we even use this range anymore? It's done. It's cooked. It is cooked. I was sold. Nothing like it. All right, listen, that's enough of me waxing poetic about the strength of the U.S. military. Let's go ahead and take a break right now. We'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that while I calm myself back down and come back, and we'll keep going here on Military Minded, different news from around the U.S. military. We'll be right back. And we're back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. I knew I'd get myself in trouble with the A10 because I knew I'd get reaction out of it. But I also knew as soon as I stumbled over the nomenclature or the caliber of the weapon on the front end that I was going to get text messages. So I ran quick to the internet. So I said 50 cal. It's a 30 millimeter GAU 8A Avenger 7-barrel Gatling gun. That's what it is. Now that I've said it, I'm going to the text messages because I'm looking over here, and lo and behold, Barry from Huntsville corrected me on it. Up to 16,000 pounds of mixed ordnance in the 30 millimeter GAU 8A cannon on 8 under wing and 3 under fuselage pylon stations, including 500-pound Mark 82 2,000-pound bombs, Mark 84 series low-high drag bombs, incendiary cluster bombs, combined effects munitions, mine dispensing munitions, AG. Barry from Huntsville is a fan, man.
Wow. I'm going to say, let's save the A10.
That's right.
I mean, dang.
And Glenn from Bunchville just says, I got to see an A10 fire from the tower when I was sent to Slovakia. Bert. I got a caller on the line who has seen one firsthand. Brian from Huntsville. Hey, Brian, how you doing, buddy?
Mighty fine, and I do not want to see that fine bird retired. A-10 Thunderbolt, a.k.a. Workhog. And somebody already got to me on the 30 millimeter, so they beat me. But Biggs Army Airfield, before I made NCO, I stood guard over 2 of those birds on occasion. Got to put my hand on the outside of them.
They're just tough, aren't they? They're just tough.
Oh, man. And then Reforger, when we go to Reforger from Fort Bliss and everything, we had some assigned to the cab, and boy, those things are magnificent. And I didn't get my boots muddy unless I had to break track on a tank. But we were so blessed, and we loved having those birds overhead. And our German friends in West Germany, they call them forked devil.
They call them what?
The forked devil.
Oh, the forked devil. Yeah. Wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Just because of the way the wings were. You have a good one.
You too,
Goodbye.
buddy. Yeah. So it's they're looking at retiring the A10 Warthog. Thunderbolt's its real name. The A10 Thunderbolt 2 is where we're actually at, I believe, right now. But yeah, they're looking at retiring it. But I will say this: there's always that inter-service rivalry, Air Force versus Army, whatever, Navy, and the guys on the ground, the Army and Marines, we respect the Air Force, generally speaking. We love the A-10. It's just much loved. I can see it right now. Steve from Huntsville says the A-10 shoots an explosive 30 millimeter round from the nose. It's a Red Bull can coming your way. And can you imagine just blowing out Red Bull cans, just brr, 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 just wearing things out? Wow. Roger from Ardmore. I knew I'd get some guys involved. Phil, the best CAS aircraft is the A6 Intruder, all weather, anytime, anywhere, attack aircraft. Okay, respect. Michael from Taft, imagine if we sent those A-10s to the Ukrainians, how devastating it'd be to the Russians to have our throwaways destroy their new stuff.
Okay, I have a question.
Speak to me.
So my question is, when they retire a piece of amazing equipment like the A-10,
right?
Is that like what we would give away to someone else that is in need? Sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering. I'm like, they're in perfectly good order. Why are we getting rid of it?
Well, the question is going to be, are they in perfectly good order? Because some of them are going to be retired out that were the oldest in the fleet. And they have airframes have to be, they measure them in hours,
right?
And they've got to go through all the usual testing and they can fly further than their shelf life, but they're going to have to be maintained. And then the question becomes, if we take them out of our fleet, are we also, by the way, going to wind up not having spare parts on the shelf anymore?
Got it.
So it's there's a lot of things. And then there's also technology. Sometimes we do foreign military sales quite often. I mean, we got a new thing out recently that the Abrams tank is going to be going to Ukraine, right? Mm-hmm. So, but there's technologies even within that tank that our folks use every day that we won't sell to a foreign nation.
Correct. So they would take stuff out of it.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot more to it.
Okay.
Does it mean that we're going to maybe see Ukrainians flying A-10s? I don't know. All I know is, and I'll say, too, one of the things the Air Force argues, I didn't mean to do it a whole segment of the A-10, but now that we're up against the break, I guess I'm going to have to. But one of the things that the Air Force argues is that in an asymmetric sort of insurgency-style warfare that we've had, like in Afghanistan and even in Iraq, you're not likely to see it. We have air superiority, and we don't have to worry as much about what ground forces have in their hands that can take down a plane that flies low and slow.
Got it.
Maybe different with the Russians or the Chinese.
Got
They
it.
have real air defenses, and the A-10 could be very vulnerable in that environment.
Okay. Makes sense.
Makes sense. Tony from Piedmont says, love with a heart the A-10. Awesome overwatch for convoys in Iraq. Yes, indeed, brother. Yes, indeed. All right, folks, I got more military stuff. It's not all A-10s. I got a stack of stuff here. Y'all stay tuned. Phil Williams, hour number 3, coming right up.
You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama's syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. Man, we got the local, the state, the national, sometimes the international, covering down on all of it, like the dude just said. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, so I'm in number 2 of the Triple Dipper. Military-minded, I call it. Text lines blew up. David from Huntsville texted in and said former Marine Representative Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin says we ought to give Taiwan, I think he says all of our harpoons, missiles. Anyways, basically saying we ought to arm up Taiwan with whatever we don't want. So I'm not opposed. Here's a story from realcleardefense.com. So the Government Accountability Office, which I didn't know they did this. I thought they just were bean counters. But the Government Accountability Office filed a report recently. This came out 2 days ago as to our country's military readiness, claiming that we have, and I'm not claiming like I don't believe it, that there have been repeated challenges over the last almost generation that have downgraded our military readiness. In its May 2nd report, the GAO says the U.S. Department of Defense has faced several challenges as it worked to rebuild and restore readiness across the military while also seeking to modernize forces. The U.S. military has been on a consistent conflict footing for the better part of a generation as it fought twin insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan. They say that the mission capability has declined considerably since 2017. While the U.S. Army and Marine Corps improved in the ground domain, they say, we find declines in the sea, air, and space domains. They cite, for example, only 2 of 49 aviation systems met their annual mission-capable goals, and the vast majority missed by over 10%. So they go down through the entire thing. I won't read you all the various aspects of the military that they claimed had problems, but what they're basically saying is being on a war footing that long, even though it has the ability to give experience to the troops themselves, it has the ability to also wear down resources, and so they're just saying that we're not at the same level of readiness that we need to be. I don't deny it, but I look at it also too. We've talked about it on the show ad nauseum. Right now, the struggle is to also recruit personnel. None of the service branches right now are projected to meet their milestones for recruiting this year. They didn't last year. I think it back. I think the Marine Corps and one of the other branches did finally make it. But part of that was a paperwork shuffle. They took people who had already signed a contract, but they weren't going to enter into the service until this year, and they recategorized them as already being in the last year in order to say they met their milestones. Let's don't play shell games. Let's just get out there and say we got it or we didn't get it. And right now, we ain't getting it. Here's another one. U.S. Special Forces reinventing themselves for a fight with China. This one came off of defenseone.com. Story came out just about 11 days ago. So, story out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, talks about the training and the emphasis on training up the next round of U.S. Special Forces, Green Berets. What are they focusing on? What are the keys that they're looking at? As they come out of what some would call typically a FID-UW mission or direct action missions out of FID-UW stands for Foreign Internal Defense and Unconventional Warfare. The FID-UW and direct action missions of Afghanistan and Iraq, they're saying that they're being retooled now and geared in a slightly different direction. That one of the things we're going to see more and more SF or Special Forces guys doing is dealing in what's known as information operations. The gathering of I.O., the ability to perceive on the battlefield what is there so that you can do a much more determined strike. That being said, they said they're watching the Ukrainians right now. They're literally watching Ukrainians, and they said the Ukrainians have developed the ability to detect, fix, and jam Russian drones. That's key. So you're looking at U.S. Special Forces probably having small teams that would insert deep, that would provide jamming capability. And we already have SIGINT and Special Ops always has their signal teams that are able to put up relay stations and that kind of thing. One step further. drone capability, mini drones like Switchblade suicide drones, whether they can employ Ravens close in on the battlefield. And this is a developing and emerging technology. And they're saying right now that they're planning, heavy drone instruction for special operations, especially special forces. They're shifting the goals within the language schools. They're not teaching Dari and Pashto because we're not going to be in Afghanistan anytime soon. They're switching over to Chinese and Russian being the most leaned upon, and they're adding Ukrainian. Not because we're going there or anything, right? There's that. Special Forces retooling its mission. Here's one. So, quiz for you. What military branch do we often consider a military branch that is technically not a part of the military branch because it's not part of the DOD? Boomer's looking at me with the quizzical look. The Coast Guard. The Coast Guard is technically a part of the Department of Homeland Security. The Coast Guard, though, is basically a militarized portion of the Department of Homeland Security. And it has a live fire mission every single day. I mean, their rules of engagement are different than ours. They are constantly on patrol, and they are in, locked and loaded because they're interdicting drug runners and all kinds of stuff all the time. But they also, people don't realize a lot of times the Coast Guard will deploy, and like right now, the Coast Guard is in the Gulf of Oman as part of an international task force, working with the U.S. Navy and foreign navies. Well, and since they have different operating parameters, they can do things that the Navy couldn't do quicker. And they also have arrest authority. They can do things that they're basically deputized for law enforcement. They can arrest and interdict and seize and board ships and do things that it's part of their charter. They can just do it. Not that we can't. I'm just saying they can do it as part of their daily mission. U.S. Coast Guard, though, fast response cutter seized $80 million worth of heroin off a fishing vessel in the Gulf of Oman just 2 days ago. That's cool. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Glenn Harris was operating in support of Combined Task Force 150, and its boarding team discovered 1,964 kilos of heroin. That's a lot of heroin. That's a lot of smack, man. 1,964 kilos of heroin on a vessel that was transiting international waters after it left Iran. So it left Iran with 1,900 kilos of heroin. No, it's not trying to fund terrorism or anything. No. Anyway, they had to seize $30 million worth of meth and heroin on another fishing vessel 2 days prior to that. So they have that one Coast Guard cutter operating way outside the bounds of our Coast Guard has seized $110 million worth of illegal drugs in the Gulf of Oman just in the last week. That's awesome. All right, you will be intrigued to know that another glass ceiling is being broken. It's important. Don't laugh. It's important.
Sure it is.
We have to break glass ceilings.
I'm sure we do.
For us to be a well-ordered society. You can't have glass ceilings. So Vice President Kamala Harris is now soon to be the first woman to ever deliver the commencement address at the West Point graduation ceremony in about 2 weeks. Whoop, whoop. Can I hear a whoop, whoop for Kamala? Don't do it. Don't even play it. No, do the womp. Do the womp, womp, womp.
Oh, that's what we need.
That's what we need, yeah.
Wah, wah.
There it is. Harris will deliver the keynote address on May 27th at the U.S. Military Academy. Have you ever seen her give a speech, though? When she gets excited and she's trying to pretend she's excited, and she talks like she's talking to kindergartners. And it'll be so cool, and you'll do these things, and you'll go to space. I mean, she's like, oh, please don't do that. Now, they do point out in the article, military.com, very liberal reporting usually from military.com, but military.com does report that it is very common for vice presidents to address the graduating classes at least one of the service academies on a rotating basis, and this time it's West Point, and Harris will be visiting West Point very soon. I look at it, okay, so here's the thing. First of all, honor the office. The Vice Presidency of the United States has now come on to the stage to address the graduating class at one of the major academies. That being said, I respect the office. And if I were in the crowd, I would sit there respectfully. I would salute the office. I would do all the things that are supposed to be done. And every one of those cadets better do that. But I will also tell you that I guarantee you that there's a bunch of those cadets that would much rather hear from a warfighter. They'd rather hear from somebody who's been in the trenches, who's going to tell them why they just spent the last 4 years getting an Ivy League education in uniform. They're about to go be leaders of troops. And I just find myself wondering, what is Kamala Harris going to say? What does she bring to the table besides, "Atta boy, you're about to be in the Army"? And I just hope she doesn't go down that road and embarrass herself, embarrass the office. But yeah, congratulations to the graduating class of 2023 from West Point and all the others. Thank you for your service. All right, military minded. There you go. We'll probably read a few texts when we get back from this break. And then come up, we'll do the last one. I got a section we're going to go out on that I'm just calling, "You Can't Make This Stuff Up." Oh, man, the things people do when they get in office. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. And we're back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right, making it cool to be a conservative. Love that bump, by the way. That was the Eagles? Was that the Eagles? Yeah. Woo. Yeah. Hey, I'll go to the text lines just for a minute. 833-687-4448 is the number if you want to text in your thoughts on what we've just covered. But I will tell you this before I do. One of our advertisers is the ELM Foundation, ELM. It stands for Expect Little Miracles. What a cool organization. So the ELM Foundation, based out of Huntsville, they're a 501c3. Their mission in life is to help people to get back into life, to get them off the streets, to help them find their self-worth again, to bring them to a place where they've got job skills, the ability to build out a resume, to go find work, to become productive. I'm telling you. And they don't do it like I always say, like the government throws money at something to see if it's going to work. No. They actually walk with them. They provide accountability. They help them make a plan, and they walk with them through what it takes to do that, and they're successful. So check them out. Their website is ELMHSV, as in Elm Huntsville, ELMHSV.org. That's Elm Foundation, ELMHSV.org. And if you talk to them, tell them you heard about it on Rightside Radio. I would appreciate that. The text lines blew up again there, Boom. See, just saying. What all we got here? Glenn from Bluntsville, he sent me in just a picture of the vice president next to a hyena to show me the comparison. I just leave that hanging there. John from Huntsville says, the only time I would ever salute Joe Biden is when I'm wearing my comfortable Let's Go Brandon t-shirt that I won in the Dale Jackson contest. Okay. Jay from Hartselle. Harris speaking at West Point. Wow, that's going to inspire you to grab a rifle and stand a post. Harris, these are future leaders, something you are not. Got to do better. Jay from Hartselle. Brian from Huntsville. Yes, he says, yes, the vice president, I won't use the name he used, but anyway, it says, and it wasn't overly rude, but anyway, he says, giving the West Point commencement speech, time for me to reread the book of Revelation. Oh, yeah. Tony from Piedmont. Yeah, we're talking about how Tony from Piedmont makes a great point. So here we are getting rid of the A-10, right? And then he says, aren't we still flying the B-52 that was made in the 50s? And I think he's right. And then he points out, you ought to see that 30 millimeter shoot at night. Yes, indeed. Comes out like a corkscrew. It's kind of, yeah. It's because of that Gatling gun spinning. But he said also, how old is the M2? The M2, the Browning M2 50 caliber machine gun, I think it's been in service since pre-World War II. It's an amazing piece of, like, you can't break it, and oh, by the way, you can't also beat it. So it just keeps on getting better. What's crazy is I've seen now in the last 10 years they've begun mounting scopes on top of that thing. Like, I never thought of having that big belt-fed 50 caliber machine gun with a scope on it, but dang. Anyway, Chappie from Madison says, my son is a pilot with the Coast Guard, presently in Singapore. Wow. Says they're deployed a bunch of different places, and of course, he's a right side ruffian. Glad of it. Tell him thank you for his service, Chappie. We appreciate it very much. And then what else we got in here? I think I just about ran most of the list. Yeah. All right. Oh, Kimball from Harvest has chimed in and says Kamala Harris will embarrass herself and the past, present, and future warriors at the West Point commencement. Well, let's hope not, man. Kimball, you have a great day, man. Have a good weekend. All right, listen, I got stuff here. This next section of the Triple Dipper we're going to get into is called You Can't Make This Stuff Up. Like, okay, I'll start with this. When I was in the legislature, I distinctly remember that we had somebody, well, I'll just tell you who it was. It was State Senator Billy Beasley, a member of the Democrat Party, who was determined that we were going to have a state cake. And so we're down there, we're dealing with budget deficits, and we're working on issues related to, fighting the teachers union on school choice and, stuff that you just feel like is pretty freaking important. And Senator Beasley was determined that we were going to take the Lane cake. You ever heard of a Lane cake, Boom? Lane cake, L-A-N-E, Lane cake. I hadn't either. And I don't want to say that I'm eating cake all the time, but I thought I'd seen a few cakes in my day. I've never heard of a Lane cake. He brought that bill up for like 3 years in a row, determined to get us to name the Lane cake as the state cake. I think it finally passed. I think it, and he even brought in like a Lane cake for everybody to sample, and it was not that good. Are you looking it up right now? Look it up and see if you can tell me before the break what the ingredients are in a Lane cake, because I remember it being rather unusual. It reminded me of a hummingbird cake, if I recall, but it's not. Oh, the face you're making right now. Put the camera on you as you read this one. Turn your camera on. We only got a minute, but what did the Lane cake come out as? Did you find the?
I'm looking at it right now, but the picture is not too
appetizing.
Not to me, at least. I don't know. The Lane cake. Let's see here. Lane cake. Yeah, it just honestly, it looks kind of like. Ooh, I don't know. There's pecans on the top. What is it? I don't even know what that is. It's stuff on the top, and it's. I don't know. Let's see here. I have to find the ingredients.
All right, we'll find the ingredients during the break because I think we're up against the break anyway. But what I was going to tell you was, it reminds me of that time we were like, why are we spending time on this Lane cake? What's going on? Well, you'll be happy to know the legislature is in session right now. A story off of Yellowhammer News. They are working to develop the state cookie. Okay, so we're not seeing anything fully yet on tax relief. We don't have anything yet on school choice, and we probably won't. We're dealing with issues related to, major importance and what we're going to do about fentanyl. But Representative Reed Ingram, well, he's got a bill, and it would name the Yellowhammer cookie, which he says originated in Montgomery as the winner of a school baking contest most recently. Like, it hadn't been around that long, but the Yellowhammer cookie would become the state cookie if the bill were to pass. You can't make this stuff up, y'all. We'll talk about it when we get back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio, solid and conservative and just plain right, covering down on some major ground across the northern half of the most beautiful state in the nation, Alabama. I'm talking about our show goes way on down south of Birmingham, up north of Huntsville, Tuscaloosa, back over to Gadsden, parts of Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, thrown in just for good measure. Well, all right, so during the break, Boomer was researching lane cake. We're going to get to that in 1 second. Before we do, I'll tell you, ZLA Solutions, they don't just serve lane cake. They work on business stuff. All right. So ZLA Solutions, epic good at getting people and jobs lined up. If you need people for your job site, let me just tell you, you need to check out their website, zlausa.com. I mean, I was just talking to one of their staff this morning, and we talk regularly. I know these people, and I know what they do, and I know they're good at it. But ZLA Solutions is doing employment staffing for work sites all over North Alabama and beyond. And I don't mean like a little bit. I mean big name employers. And it can be everything from hospitals and service providers to factory and automotive manufacturing and all of it. So listen, if you need people, they can do the recruiting, the background checks, the drug testing. They can get you blue collar, white collar, no collar, don't matter. Onesies and twosies or a whole shift. You just tell them what you need. They'll work with you. ZLA Solutions at zlausa.com. And tell them, by the way, you heard about it on our right side. That's all. I always get a kick when they tell me, we heard another one. Boomer, have you solved the lane cake? This is state cake now. This is important.
So important.
Absolutely important.
Never heard of it. And I'm kind of glad.
Is your camera on, by the way?
No, my camera's not on. I know. I'm so bad at turning my camera on.
But people need to see your face when you're laughing at the lane cake because it's cracking me up.
So this lane cake over here, the Alabama state cake has, I can't even say the first part, maraschino?
Maraschino cherries.
Oh, maraschino.
Okay, maraschino cherries. All
cherries.
Right.
Okay, drain cherries. Okay, that's okay. I'm not a coconut fan. It has coconut, sweetened coconut, shredded coconut.
Yeah.
Chopped pecans. Okay. Golden raisins. Nope, not for me. But there is a secret ingredient that I do like. Bourbon. So it has that going for it.
I remember that. As a matter of fact, when I tasted it, it was like heavy on the bourbon. It was like, whoo, I'm pretty sure
so it's heavy on it.
We could pass all kinds of legislation with this cake.
You should have that cake out before all of it.
Served up lane cake, and then we balance the budget.
So that with the sugar, the butter, all that stuff is the filling of the cake, and then it's just the normal cake. I guess the picture I saw, it slices the cake up and then puts the filling in between each slice. Not a fan.
I'll just be honest with you. So, when all that was going on, Charlene was down at the governor's mansion, and she just texted in. She goes, I had some lane cake at the governor's mansion, unimpressed, and so was everyone else.
There we go.
In fact, look at this. We got people texting in about it. Brian from Huntsville, lane cake has bourbon in it. So does my main chili recipe, he says. Nice.
I've done some bourbon barbecue sauce.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty good.
That works, but not lane cake. Anyway,
lane cake.
Martha Stewart says, this is Leanne from Huntsville. Martha Stewart says, invented by Emma Rylander Lane in the late 19th century, this bourbon-spiked raisin, pecan, and coconut showstopper gets more flavorful with age. Martha made the recipe on episode 707 of Martha Bakes. Well, there's some...
Okay, wow, she knows about it.
Hey.
Okay.
Either that or she cut and pasted that right off Wikipedia. Either way, there you. And then Darlene from Gadsden just texted in and says, Phil, just letting you know I'm listening up here in Illinois. Thank you, my friend.
I like it.
That's Darlene, formerly of Gadsden, now living in Illinois, still listening to the show. All right, so back on the you can't make this stuff up. So Yellowhammer News reports that Alabama may have a delicious new state symbol, the Yellowhammer cookie. Well, at least they named it after something statewide, right? So on Wednesday, a bill moved forward. This is 2 days ago. On Wednesday, a bill moved forward in the Alabama House of Representatives to designate a blend of mainstay Alabama ingredients as the official state cookie. Representative Reed Ingram, the bill's author, brought students from Trinity Presbyterian School who coined the recipe to make the case. So I will say this. I'm a little surprised that they're taking a brand new cookie that's never had any real track record. Like, to me, if somebody said, we need a state pie, it's going to be pecan pie, or it's going to be,
Right. You want to have something that's reputable.
And that we actually eat.
Exactly.
Ain't nobody I know ever eaten a lane cake. And apparently the Yellowhammer cookie is pretty new, but it's got peanuts, pecans, 2 crops which are significant to the state, yes. And anyway, it won a contest, and now they want to make it the state cookie. We'll see what happens. But, I did that one as a lighthearted opening to the you can't make this stuff up. So let's talk about other people that are in office that are making use of their time to do things you look at and go, come on, man, do something that's meaningful to the community. Well, Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan district attorney who also, brought charges against President Trump, who has been downgrading felonies left and right and letting criminals walk the streets. Alvin Bragg just brought charges against a young former Marine, Daniel Penny. And you may have seen this. Daniel Penny, former Marine, was on the subway, and there was a guy who was menacing the other riders in the subway. And he was basically threatening people, and Penny took him down and held him in a headlock, while 2 other guys, by the way, the guy he took down the ground, Penny is white, the guy he took down the ground is black. All right, instant problem. You know what's going to happen with the activists, except 2 other people were helping him hold the guy down, and they were both black. They have not been arrested because Penny was the one who had him in the headlock. The guy died. He asphyxiated, so, we don't know if he had any underlying conditions or whether it was the headlock itself that did it and cut off his airway. I don't know. What I do know is this. He was intervening when somebody was threatening people on a subway where people already don't feel safe, in a city where crime is now rampant, and the district attorney has brought charges against him for manslaughter. And I look at this and I think, at what point are you allowed to help people? And Alvin Bragg has got nothing better to do. By the way, the guy who he had to take down had already been arrested 40 times. 40 times. And he also attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old girl as one of his arrests. And he was threatening people with violence. And lo and behold, the guy who stopped him is the one who's going to, stand trial. How about this? So, California. Oh, Lord, what's going to be in this story? California. Have you seen the story about reparations? So, it gets deeper. All right, so the Reparations Commission, a 9-member committee, first convened 2 years ago, story here from USA Today, actually came out and approved a pretty hefty list of proposals that they believe are important. They keep in mind, there was never any slavery in California. It was never a slave state. Doesn't matter. They want to do, based upon a 71-year life expectancy for the average citizen in California, they want to provide an estimated $13,000 a year for each year of residency to members of the black community in California as reparations for slavery, which ended 150 years ago. They are looking at a $800 billion in reparations they want to pay out. So basically, I want to know what happens if you just identify as black. If we just identify as black, can we go there and get money? I mean, Boomer and I are quite proud of being cis white males.
Absolutely.
We not only identify as cis white males, we are cis white males. But if we were to go to California and just show up and say, I'm on the ground, fellas. Today I identify as black. I want some money. Is that what they're going to do? Well, you know what's funny? Gavin Newsom, who has been letting this go, sort of mollycoddling it, pretending, he's come back and basically said, thank you for your time. It's very important that we recognize the needs of the community, blah, 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 but we're not going to be writing any checks. So basically, he let it string along for like 2 years, and then he's going to come back and go, yeah, but we're not going to be doing that. Well, then why'd you encourage it? Why didn't you shut it down when you had the chance, you knucklehead? I got some callers on the line, and then the order right there, 1 and 2. Line 1, Wolverine Dan. How you, buddy?
Well, I'm doing quite well, my friend. You piqued my interest when you spoke of cookies. I make 3 different types of cookies. I've got an order for one of my set of cookies for this Sunday for a young lady that's bringing it to her mother's for Mother's Day. I bake and cook exceptionally well, and I will say that, and I can back it up because my mother was she should have been a chef, and she taught me all her recipes, and I've got it, and I kicked up this one recipe. It's a oatmeal raisin cookie. Now, the oatmeal raisin cookie has praline syrup in it, so it's a nut-based cookie, so anybody who's got an allergy can't eat a nut-based allergy, cannot eat it. But it has the praline in it, okay? And then, but now here's the kicker. On top of it is an Irish cream glaze.
Ooh.
Okay, I'm really getting like snackish hungry right now.
Well, I told Boomer, I said, I'll bring some over to you guys. He said, come on to Gaston. I said, what? I thought you guys were Huntsville. I mean, I'll be more than happy to bring it in Huntsville with Gaston. My God. I mean, we got to do it. You know what? You got to do me a favor. Now, Boomer's got my number. Or I go back off the air, I'll give my number. When you ever come into town, please let me know.
All right, man.
And I will touch you, and you could, and then you bring those cookies to Boomer if Boomer doesn't come with you, because I'm telling you, once you eat my cookie, you will see it is, and I can back it up. It's still people go nuts over it.
Oh, all right, Wolverine Dan, you are the man. We appreciate you, brother. I got one more call to get before the break, bro.
Touch me up. Touch me up with Dave. Let me know when you come into town. I'll take care of you.
All right, bud. See ya. Have a good weekend. Line 2, real quick before the break. Lee from Huntsville. I got about a minute and a half. How you doing, Lee?
I'm good. I'll make it fast. Wolverine Dan does not make the best cookies. I rehydrate my raisins with bourbon, Dan.
Oh.
So there. And I make a raspberry chiffon pie that literally would make you weep with every bite. Every single bite.
Make you weep with
Tears
every
of joy.
bite. I don't want any crying food. Why do I want crying food?
Tears of joy.
So let me ask you a question, though. When you rehydrate a raisin, does that make it a drunk grape?
I don't rehydrate it quite that much, but yes. It just makes it. I make it at Christmas time. It's good with you can do bourbon or spiced rum or something in the cookie just for an interest. But there you go.
Well, nice.
And on the case of California, would Kamala get half a check or maybe no check because her family's from the islands and they actually own slaves, so maybe she has to pay?
Ooh, that's a question worth asking. We need to find that out. All right.
And the reason that he's doing it, really fast, the reason he's doing it is to stir up his base. They're going to get all these recommendations, and then they're going to say, well, we don't have any money because, white supremacy to pay this out, to make everybody angry and to stir up the base.
You know what's crazy, too, is he's white. He'll say that, he'll blame his own race or basically he's blaming himself, which is just...
Of course.
It's just nuts.
He's shameless.
Lee, thanks. Have a great weekend.
Yep.
See ya. All right, Boomer, take it to the break, brother. We'll do the last break of the day. We'll come right back. I had more on the stack for things you can't make this stuff up, but apparently we got people wired up on Lane cake and cookies. But in the meantime, y'all stay tuned. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. Solid conservative and just plain right. I tell you what, we'll run through some text messages here. It's been a great show, man. It just kind of flowed. By the way, got confirmation just a minute ago. U.S. Senator Katie Britt will be calling into the show on Monday. So there's that. We'll plan another great week for it. This has been a banner week, by the way. We had Ted Nugent. We had Charles Mulley from Kenya. We had at least one state senator, an analyst. We had Boomer McQueen. We had all these other dippers. I mean, it's been a full week, dude. Wow.
Have been a full week.
Full week.
Love it.
Saw an email here from Harriet, and I don't know where Harriet's from. It's an email, so it just came in last night, I believe. Harriet saying, is there a way I can get a copy of what was yesterday's monologue? She says it was excellent. Thank you, Harriet. I appreciate that. Thanks for your broadcast. I listen to most every day. Yes, ma'am, you can. If you're listening, if anybody else feels that way, like you hear a segment on the show, like you want to hear the Ted Nugent interview again, or you like one of the monologues, or Boomer McQueen, or whatever it is, doesn't matter. The show gets podcasted out every single day. So we do the show for 3 hours live, taking all the calls, doing all the things, but then we also podcast it afterwards. And Boomer sends that thing out. Usually it's up that night. So you can go and grab any segment of the show, and the monologue, by the way, Harriet, in your case, the monologue is usually a standalone podcast. We're at like 143,000 downloads of the podcast right now. It's crazy, but I'm also blessed by it. So thank y'all very much. Text lines. Frank from Madison says, given the qualifications, Meghan Markle would qualify for California reparations. I suppose that's true. I guess they don't have any requirements that you have to be, 100% of the right ethnicity. I mean, I'm assuming then that you get a half reparation if you're of a mixed race. I don't know. How does that work? I remember hearing that Groucho Marx, back in the day, there were times when the ethnic discriminations against Jewish people was even in America, and there were country clubs where Jews weren't allowed. It was horrible. But Groucho Marx was Jewish, and he took his son to somewhere in some pool, and he was told he was not allowed to swim in the pool. Groucho Marx was not allowed to swim in the pool, and so he looked at the guy and said, "Well, my son's half Jewish. Can he go in up to his waist?" Which I thought was an awesome response. You go, Groucho Marx. John from Huntsville says, Phil gets an A+, Boomer gets a B+ for not being a fan of coconut.
You know what? At least he gave me an explanation why.
That's right. He says, I got 2 words for you, almond joy. Oh. I like almond joy. Graham from Meridianville says, I sense a Right Side Radio cookie cook-off in the near future. You know what? We may have to do it. It sounds
there's a few things we need to do with the Right Side Ruffians.
Between Brian from Huntsville and Wolverine Dan and Lee from Huntsville, we got some cookers out there.
Yeah, we do.
All right, so we'll see what happens. Maybe there's a plan brewing. Brand new in the text lines. Welcome to it. Earl from Athens. Once a Marine, always a Marine, he says. I agree. Semper Fi. Thanks for your service, Earl from Athens. Glad you're in the text string now. Leanne from Huntsville says, just had to hear to complete the Leanne caucus. So she's just chiming in to make sure all the Lees and Leannes got heard from.
There we go.
We got a bunch of them.
We do.
And they're all from Huntsville.
Oh, man.
Anyway, Jeremy from Huntsville says, what did you identify as a Californian? Wait. What? Okay. What if you? He came back and corrected. What if you identify as a black Californian living in another state? It's a great point. Do I have to reside in the state? Can I move back to the state?
Just identify. I mean, everything's just identify now.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So he's saying, what if you identify as a black? I see. I see what he's saying. Boomer, we can mail it in.
I'm going to mail it.
We don't have to go.
Hey.
Just a couple of cis white males identifying as a black Californian.
There we go.
Pay up, buddy.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then we'll take it and buy guns.
Ooh.
Because that's what we do. That's right.
Even better.
So we can,
I like it.
So we can shoot Bud Light cans. That's right.
Yes.
Robin from Tupelo, Mississippi chimes in, says, we adopted a child who was half black and half Mexican. How much can we get? Apparently you get half a reparation. Half a reparation. Wow. And then Brian from Huntsville says, the Three Stooges were Jewish if memory serves, but his Savior is Jesus. All right, listen. Y'all have an amazing weekend. Mother's Day, don't forget. Boomer, don't forget.
I didn't forget.
We're back here Monday at 2. We'll see you then.